Hey everyone, if you're new here, welcome. My name is Keisha and today I'm going to be giving you some spooky middle grade book recommendations. So I actually already did a spooky middle grade recommendations video last year, so I'm going to go ahead and link that one down in the description box below in case you want to see those books. But I have a lot of new middle grade books to add to the list, so without further ado, let's just go ahead and hop into the 15 books that I'll be talking to you about today. First up, we have The Clackity by Laura Simpf. This book was released earlier this year and I feel so blessed that the author sent me an advanced reader copy. I was so excited to share this book with the world, and I now have 2 copies because I did want to support the author, so I bought a final copy as well. This book follows our main character, Evie, and she lives in Blight Harbor with her Aunt Desdemona. Now, her Aunt Desdemona only has one rule. Evie cannot visit the abattoir or the slaughterhouse. But one day, Aunt Desdemona goes missing and Evie just knows it has something to do with the slaughterhouse. So she goes there and she meets this shifty creature called the Clackity. And the Clackity tells her that he will help her find her Aunt Desdemona if she helps him first. So there is this serial killer called John Jeffrey Pope. He has passed and his ghost is snooping around where the Clackity is. And the Clackity says if she can bring him the ghost of John Jeffrey Pope, then he will help her find her Aunt Desdemona. But as I mentioned before, the Clackity is a very shifty creature, so can he be trusted? So now Evie is going to have to go into this world of hungry witches, penny-eyed ghosts, and other dangerously fickle beings to try to capture John Jeffrey Pope, but also avoid him and see if she can find her Aunt Desdemona. I will say that for a debut novel, I was so impressed by Laura's writing. It did not feel like a debut at all. It was so good. I loved the atmosphere. I loved how she told the story. I loved so many different elements of this. And I will say, if you like books like Coraline, or if you like a little bit of fantasy thrown into your spooky middle grades, this might be the book for you. I cannot say enough good things about it. There were so many elements that I enjoyed, but I can't really tell you without spoiling you. If you want a little bit more detailed of a review, you can go over on my Instagram and scroll back a little bit to my Clackity review. I actually read this back in May, which was when I was hosting a spooky middle grade readathon called BOOKATHON. If you haven't heard of that, I'm actually going to be hosting it again this October, so I'll go ahead and drop the announcement video link down in the description box as well. Either way, this is one of my new favorite spooky middle grade books and one I think you should add to your list as well. Next up, I have a spooky middle grade graphic novel, which is The Sleepover by Michael Regina. This book follows a boy named Matthew, and Matthew is devastated to find out that his nanny has actually died, and he is grieving. And through this grieving process, his friends from school decide that they want to come over and have a sleepover to see if they can help him feel a little bit better. But when they come over for the sleepover, there's a new nanny there, and these boys think that the new nanny might be a monster. This story is so good. I love the art style in the story. Let me see if I can show you something without spoiling anything. I love the art style. I love how creepy it is. It is very reminiscent of like an 80s book, or maybe not an 80s book. I say that because there are like cord phones in here and TVs with dials on them and like older things. So obviously this is set in the past. And also it kind of gives me Stranger Things vibes just because of the creep factor and some of the things that go on. So I highly recommend checking it out. It's super creepy. I don't want to show y'all like the spoilery things because if you flip through you can kind of see certain things. But just know it's super creepy. It does jump timelines a little bit too. So if this sounds like something that you're interested in, I would highly recommend checking it out. Next up, I have Strange Star by Emma Carroll. I picked this book up because I was really interested in Emma Carroll after I read one of her historical fiction books, and I absolutely loved it. This book still has that historical feel, and it actually has dual timelines as well. So this story starts with a man named Lord Byron, and he is having his friends over for dinner. They're going to sit around a fire and exchange scary stories. But there is a knock on the door late at night, and a girl appears, and she is terrified. And she, first of all, is looking for her sister, who she said was kidnapped by a woman named Mary Shelley. And she is also convinced that somebody has followed her to this home. This bounces back and forth in dual timelines, like I said, and I feel like if you are an adult who is wanting to get into spooky middle grade, this one might be good for you because the writing reads a little bit older to me. And also, if you are interested in a really atmospheric gothic story, this is probably a good one for you as well, especially if you are a fan of Mary Shelley or Frankenstein. This story is very much inspired by the creation of Frankenstein, so if that sounds up your alley, definitely check this one out. Next, I have The Edge of In-Between by Lorelei Saverin. So, I fell in love with the Secret Garden story earlier this year, so I have been on a hunt for all of the retellings. This book came out earlier this year and the cover was absolutely gorgeous, and that is initially what drew me in. So I had no idea this was a Secret Garden retelling or reimagining until I read the synopsis. So this story follows a girl named Lottie, and Lottie lives in Vivelle, which is this vibrant city where life exists in brilliant technicolor and everyone is born with magic. Lottie is no exception, but when tragedy strikes, color is stripped from Lottie's heart and from the world around her. Then she is taken in by her reclusive uncle. Here's where we get the Secret Garden tie-in. So she moves to this vast manor called Forsaken, which is located in a gray wasteland between the land of the living and ever after and the land of the dead. There, Lottie discovers more secrets and mysteries than she ever dreamed possible. A locked up garden, a wise cardinal, a hidden boy, and a family whose world is full of color despite the bleakness around them. Though Lottie feels nothing but despair, the people and things she encounters in Forsaken begin to pull at the threads of her heart, slowly returning some of the color to Lottie's world. And then everything changes once more. When splintered magic threatens to consume everyone and everything she holds dear, Lottie must find a way to thaw both the world and the hearts of those around her before time runs out. This is such a good story, such a beautiful story, and a beautiful exploration of grief when it shows it in colors and in grays. I love how imaginative this story was, and I also loved how obviously it was a little bit of a reimagining of the Secret Garden. This does have spooky elements. There are some ghosts that show up, and at the very end of this story, it gets even spookier. So just keep that in mind. I do think this would be a good read for spooky season if you want a more spooky Secret Garden. So I loved so much about this story. I have not read anything by Lorelei Savern before, but I know she has a backlist title called The Circus of Stolen Dreams, which is also a creepy book that I hope to get to soon. Next, I have Salon by Sylvia Doye and Paula Antista. My apologies if I pronounce those names wrong, but this is a story about Salon. Also, just look at this cover and these illustrations. I mean, how could you not want to read that? This is a graphic novel that to me just really reminds me of the Fantastic Beast world, like from Harry Potter, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. It kind of is reminiscent of that for me because Salon is going to this school to study mythical creatures and things end up going awry. I also think if you enjoy mythology in general that you might enjoy this book as well, because we do have a Medusa character that shows up in there at one point in time. But yeah, this is a super interesting story with a really cool magical school and amazing magical creatures. I just think it's absolutely beautiful. It was a stunning graphic novel, and it's going to be the first in a series. It is a translated work, so I don't know when we'll get the rest of the series, but I'm very excited about this one. It was so good, and I highly recommend it. Then we have the book that I think may be my favorite book right now, like my favorite spooky middle grade book, and that is Behind the Bookcase by Mark Stansland. I read this book last year and it was such a pleasant surprise. So I originally picked this up because the cover reminded me of Coraline, which is one of my favorite spooky middle grade books, and this story delivered. I don't even have all the words. Again, you probably would find a more detailed response from me on Instagram or on Goodreads for my review of this book. Let me tell you what the story is about. So this story follows Sarah and her brother and their family as they are going to her grandma Winnie's estate to clear it out because her grandmother has recently passed. Of course, Sarah does not want to do this. She doesn't want to think about her grandmother's passing. So she reluctantly goes along. When she gets there though, she ends up finding this letter that is unfinished that her grandmother wrote. And it says, strange things are happening behind the bookcase. This story was so good. One of the things that I really loved about it is the illustrations were super creepy and you go into this other world. It definitely reminds me of Coraline, except the whole, you don't have like the other mother aspect or anything like that. But just some of the things about it did really remind me of Coraline. I really enjoyed this one. Also, there were some elements in here, I don't know if it was purposeful or not, but it really brought me back to my faith. There's elements of good and evil in here, and it was just such a good story. I think, again, if you like a little bit of fantasy thrown into your spooky middle grades, you might enjoy this one. But just remember, I said this was my favorite right now, like the favorite that I've read in a long time, and it's just, I don't even know what to say. I want to show you more pictures, but I also don't want to spoil anything for you because it's so stinking good. But Oh, like I can't show you that picture. It's just so good. So you'll have to trust me on this one. If this sounds at all interesting to you, I highly recommend picking it up. The next book I have is No Place for Monsters by Corey Merritt. This is a graphic novel that I read earlier this year as well, and it follows these two unlikely friends who are trying to save their town from disappearing. So we have these two friends, and they realize that all of these kids are disappearing, but when the kids disappear, nobody notices. The parents, the friends, nobody notices, and they actually can't even remember that they even existed. So now it's up to these two kids to figure out what is going on and solve the mystery before their town disappears for good. This author, I think, created the art for Pop Tropica, so if it looks a little familiar, that would be why. I definitely thought the illustrations here were very spooky. You can tell by the cover, there is a very creepy character in this story. It is not one of my favorites, but I will tell you any of the books on this list are 3 stars and above, so they are ones I would recommend. I thought this was really interesting how it tied in the horror of something that is very prevalent in children's lives. Maybe not daily, but it's just something you would expect to tie in with a kid. So I thought that was really interesting, and I thought this was a really interesting graphic novel. Just know that going into it, it's not a graphic novel like how Salon was, where you have it set up in the grids like a comic. It is a little bit more set up in the style of something maybe like Diary of a Wimpy Kid, but I still thought it was a good one nonetheless. Next, I have Ghost Girl by Ali Malinenko. This was such a creepy story. If you are one of those people that don't like creepy smiles or people giving you creepy looks or smiles, this one might creep you out just a little bit. But let me tell you what this one's about as well. So this follows Z Puckett, and Z Puckett loves ghost stories. She just never expected to be living one. It all starts with a dark and stormy night. When the sky is clear, everything is different. People are missing. There's a creepy new principal who seems to know everyone's darkest dreams, and Z is seeing frightening things, large scary dogs that talk, and maybe even a ghost. When she tells her classmates, only her best friend Elijah believes her. Worse, mean girl Nellie gives Z a cruel nickname, Ghost Girl. But whatever the storm washed up isn't going away. Everyone's most selfish wishes start coming true in creepy ways. All 3 of them, Z, Elijah, and Nellie, will have to work together if they're going to give their ghost story a happy ending. This was a really good story. Again, this is one that I would recommend. It's very creepy. It's a little bit different than ones that I've read before, so I thought that was really interesting. I will say that Nellie, the bully character who ends up having a turnaround, really did annoy me, and that part did seem a little bit unbelievable of how she turned around, but it's really interesting to find out what is happening in this story. Next up, I have Monsters in the Mist by Juliana Brandt. I also received an advanced reader copy from the author on this one, so thank you again so much for sending me that. I was very excited to read this one, and I've actually already passed it along to my middle grade book club kiddos for them to check out. They were very excited to read the story, and I think this is a really good one because it touches on subjects that aren't touched on a lot in middle grade. So when Glennon moves to this lighthouse on a mysterious island, it is up to him to now discover why all of these people that come to visit this island are never heard from again before his family is taken captive by this curse as well. This story is very, very hard-hitting, so just know that going in. You might want to look up trigger warnings. I'll go ahead and tell you it does deal with topics of abuse, especially familial abuse, so just know that going in. But I feel like it handled it in a way that was really important for kids who struggle with this, or for kids who maybe don't realize that stuff like this is going on, and it kind of would give them insight into situations like this. I think if you're looking for a good story with a coastal setting and those hard-hitting elements, this would be a good recommendation for you. Next, I have one of my favorite middle grade graphic novels that's spooky, and that is The Ghoul Next Door by Cullen Bunn and Kat Ferris. I picked this up on a whim at the bookstore when I was out traveling last year, and I read it in the bookstore and I was like, oh my gosh, why have I never heard of this before? This was such an interesting story, and the illustrations are very interesting as well. You have some that are very colorful like this. You have others, if I can find any. Most of them are really colorful. Oh my gosh, look at this one though. Oh, that's gonna give you, maybe not, just glance. But that is so beautiful. The art style and the watercolor in this is just, I have no words. But let me tell you what this one's about also. 11-year-old Gray lives in the legend-haunted New England town of Anders Landing, and he can't help but feel like a pair of eyes are watching his every move. He even starts to discover odd, gruesome gifts left for him, like little bits and pieces taken from the graveyard. Items like art carved from bones or jewelry made from, hopefully not human, remains. Soon, Gray is caught up in something bigger than he could ever have imagined. he finds himself drawn into a strange mystery involving a race of reclusive subterranean creatures, ghouls, the eaters of the dead. Turns out his secret admirer is a ghoul named Lavinia. Gray and Lavinia prove that friendship can go beyond the grave. The only problem is their friendship breaks traditions, and the punishment is a fate worse than death. You guys, this was both creepy and sweet, and I loved it so much. Like, the friendship of the main character and the ghoul next door is just, I loved it so much. So if you're looking for a good spooky story that also has a good friendship story, I would highly recommend you checking this one out. Then I have The Keeper by Guadalupe Garcia McCall. I also read this book earlier this year, and oh my word. Let me tell you, again, if you are an adult who is trying to get into middle grade and you haven't quite yet, this is a good one, because honestly, this is a book I might hesitate to hand to my child because it gets really creepy. It actually is based on the real story of the Westfield Watcher. If you know what that is, then you know. If you don't know what that is, please do not look it up if you're interested in reading this book, because I feel like you should read this first, then look up the Westfield Watcher so you're not spoiled for the book, because it is very similar, not the same though. But let me just tell you what this one's about. Moving from Texas to Oregon was a bad idea. James has known this from the second his parents told him about their seemingly perfect new house in the perfectly friendly town of Brentville. Of course, even he couldn't have predicted just how bad and terrifying their new lives would be. No sooner have James and his family arrived in their new home than he starts getting mysterious and sinister letters from someone called the Keeper. Someone who claims to be watching him. Someone who is looking for young blood. James and his sister Ava are obviously in danger, but the problem with making a fuss about moving and having a history of playing practical jokes is that no one believes James, not even his parents. Now James and Ava need to figure out who is sending the letters before they become the Keeper's next victims. Because one thing is clear, uncovering the truth about the Keeper is the only thing that will keep them alive. Spooky letters from some stalker person who wants kids. The parents don't believe the kids because James and Ava play pranks on each other all the time and are like, James is a really huge jokester. So it's like The Boy Who Cries Wolf. How stinking scary. How scary is that? And look at this cover, and there's like a creepy guy up there. Like, there are parts of this story that actually explain to you what you would do in a kidnapping situation and how you would get out of it. Like, it just is a lot, but it's very scary. It starts out more humorous, so it's about like half of the story is humorous. I love the relationship of the brother-sister duo in this one. James and Ava are absolutely hilarious to follow. Then the story takes a really creepy turn. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, again, I would recommend this one because it is so creepy and so good. Next, I have The Creepy Case Files of Margot Malou by Drew Wang. This is a graphic novel series. I read the first book and it was really cute, and also it's more like whimsical creepy. I wasn't really scared of it, but it was really good. So this follows Charles, and he has recently moved to Echo City and has found out that there are monsters in his home. But what is Charles to do? You know, his parents check everything. There's no monsters there. But then he finds out that there is this girl named Margot Malou who is let me get this right, she is a monster mediator. And the neighborhood kids say that monsters are afraid of her. Well, Charles really hopes so, because he's got a lot of monsters to deal with. This is such a fun story with Margot dealing with trolls and ogres and ghosts and ghouls. And I think Charles is just fascinated by her and fascinated by the fact that the monsters are scared of her. It's very cute. So I haven't seen this one around a lot. I don't know if it's like from a publisher that's lesser known or what, but just know that this is a good one. I think there's 3 books out in the series, so I would recommend checking that out if you're looking for a spooky middle grade graphic novel. Then I have Juniper Berry by M.P. Kozlowski. This book does some creepy stuff. It is a very short book. Let me just show you the first little page here, okay? This describes the story right there, okay? It kind of reminds you of It, right? But like, look at the hand that's holding that balloon. Like, there are some creepy scenes in this. There are a couple of pictures here and there. I'm not going to show you any super spoilery, but there's one right there. You won't know what that means. But there are some really interesting illustrations that kind of remind me of like claymation. They're kind of drawn like that. Like this one right here, you can kind of see what I'm talking about. Really interesting story. One that I wasn't sure if I was going to like or not, but just what was going on, certain things that happened really creeped me out. But This is about Juniper Berry, and Juniper Berry notices one day that her mother and father are not the same people that they used to be. See, her parents were struggling actors and now they're famous, but it's not only that that's a change. She really feels like her mom and dad just aren't the same. One day in her backyard, she ends up finding out what really happened, and the story goes from there. I will say that this does deal with a topic of, well, you can tell from the front, it's a tale of terror and temptation. So it deals with the topic of temptation, and I think you could also draw this back into Christian faith if you wanted to, but also just in general in life, the lessons that you learn about temptation in this story are very, very good. So keep that in mind as well. Then I have one more graphic novel, and that is Garlic and the Vampire by Bree Paulson. I feel like this book has gotten around at this point on BookTube, but I did want to share it here as well. It does have a sequel out now called Garlic and the Witch. If you're looking for less of a spooky story, but more of a cozy story, this is a good one. So this is Garlic, and Garlic is very timid and anxious, and also just super freaking cute. I mean, I cannot. I'm Garlic, okay? I'm Garlic. And Garlic has a friend named Carrot, and Carrot tries to encourage Garlic. Garlic lives in this like garden of magical vegetables that honestly, like, they get up and they help tend the garden. So I'm like, are you cannibalistic to your own species? Like, what is going on? But anyways, this witch owns the garden and she helps the vegetables come to life. And one day there's like this spooky home, and everyone is really scared that a vampire has moved in. So who do you think they send to go check out the premises? Garlic, because Garlic and vampires don't mix. So Garlic has to learn to be brave and go check out this vampire situation. Again, this is more of a cozy graphic novel than a spooky one, but I highly recommend checking it out because, I mean, it's going to give you all the warm, cozy fall feelings. And lastly on my list, I have The Door by the Staircase by Catherine Marsh. Once again, I picked this book up because it reminded me of Coraline from the cover, but let me tell you that the story is nothing like Coraline on the inside. This story is heavily influenced by Russian folklore and also mythical creatures. So if any of those things pique your interest, this might be an interesting story for you to pick up. We have Mary, who is in an orphanage. She's not happy. She's tried to escape multiple times, but she can't seem to get out. She's 12 years old and she feels like she's never going to be adopted, until one day, Madame Z shows up to adopt her. Madame Z whisks her off to this very strange town where she makes a new friend named Jacob, and she and Jacob end up figuring out about Madame Z's secret identity, or real identity, her strange identity. And the story goes on from there as Mary tries to figure out if she is in a dangerous situation. I won't say anything more about that. If you know anything about Russian folklore, you probably know where the story is going to go. I did going in. It wasn't too much of a spoiler for the story for me. There were still things that happened that I didn't know were going to happen. So it's very interesting, and I would recommend checking this one out. All right, y'all, that is all of the spooky middle grade books that I have to recommend for you today. Hopefully you found some new ones here that you would like to add to your list, but I hope you enjoyed. And if you made it this far in the video, go ahead and leave. Is there a bat emoji? I don't know if there's a bat emoji. There should be. I was going to say leave a bat emoji. Leave like a bat or a garlic or a vampire emoji down below, because this was like such a cute book and I really feel like you should read it. So leave one of those 3 emojis down below, and thank you all again for watching. I hope that you found some great spooky recommendations today. If you have any spooky recommendations for me that you think I haven't read yet, please pop them down in the comments. You know I'm always looking for a new spooky middle grade book to check out. Thanks again for watching. I love you all so much, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye, friends.